Namaste. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Apollo 13 was NASA's third crewed moon landing mission. But an oxygen tank explosion almost 56 hours into the flight left one tank completely damaged and the other barely operational. After astronaut Jack Swigert famously quipped, "Houston, we've had a problem here," NASA engineers scrambled to find a solution. They guided an apprehensive but determined Commander James Lovell and crew to board the Aquarius lander for a safe return to our planet. Perhaps the greatest near disaster NASA astronauts have ever survived, the safe return has been largely credited to Captain Lovell's emotional intelligence in ensuring that the ground and craft crew worked together to save lives and families. Today's conversation with the inimitable Vinita Bali will take us through the how and why of emotional intelligence and how it matters in productive and effective management. Before we begin, I request Usharani Manne, Chairperson FLO Hyderabad, to light the auspicious lamp and deliver her welcome address.
Esteemed guests, Ms. Vinita Bali, Dipti Nair, fellow chairpersons, past chairs, my dear FLO members and viewers, Namaste. In the 25 years since I founded my company, I have learned that the business cost of an underappreciated team can be very high. I have seen that the more I try to understand my employees, the more I can help them grow and feel fulfilled. The more I recognize individual strengths and weaknesses, the better I can align company resources and leverage the unique talent of my employees. For a long time, I did not have a name for this. In recent years, though, emotional intelligence has been recognized as a vital cog in business strategy. By bringing our human side to work, by recognizing that everyone has a personal story and experiences, we leaders, especially, can connect better and solidify a relationship based on trust, becoming the leader a team wants to rally behind. As an organization of entrepreneurs, this afternoon's discussion is going to be a truly relevant one for FLO. Coming to our activities, the good number, almost 34 number of applications the FLO mentorship cell received for both mentor and mentee positions is indication enough of the spirit of enterprise that flows through FLO. The structured training module will surely help you become an effective mentor. The incubation team has received 17 applications from startups coming from very interesting business backgrounds. We are in the process of inducting them into IIIT, IIMR, and VHub, depending on their specific requirement. The activities of FLO Incubator at CIE IIIT Hyderabad is kickstarting with a boot camp on 21st and 22nd of this month. The 30 days of micro accelerator program, which will facilitate one-on-one mentorship to review business ideas, plans has been announced, requesting all our aspiring mentors and mentees to enroll for it as well. I'm happy to announce that we signed an MOU with NutriHub, the incubator at Indian Institute of Millets Research. NutriHub is a unique and first of its kind incubator catering to the startup needs of budding entrepreneurs in the nutri-cereals or millet sector. The objective of the MOU is to work towards creating women entrepreneurs and facilitate an appropriate platform for women to think, learn, create, adopt, and achieve true financial freedom and also gain the power to produce wealth. In partnership with Sleepwell Foundation, we are organizing an online workshop on entrepreneurship basics for the urban workforce. This is being provided free of cost for 10th class pass, women of 18 years and above. And I'm happy to inform you that we have received 200 applications in less than a week. Thanks to Radha Rani, our head of initiative, for taking this forward. Do let our EC member Prashanti Shekhar know you if you have anyone in mind who you think can benefit from this workshop. As you all know, we launched Tirumani, the FLO assisted brand of Cheryl Crafts, on the 1st of this month. We have been successful in placing them on an e-commerce platform, Weave Smart, and are in talks with Indie Roots for a physical shelf presence. Weave Smart has already reported high traction for the products in the last 3 days, and the craft design family is gearing up to increase their production by employing more women artists to cater to the increased demand. As part of FLO Hyderabad's mental health initiative, Reach Out, we have launched in association with Roshni NGO the Say No to Suicide video challenge on the occasion of World Suicide Prevention Day on 10th of September. Do participate in it. The cause is universal and unfortunately real. Vinita, I must confess something here today. As soon as we are confirmed for the position of chairperson, most of us start planning ahead. The time available generally is 2 years, which gives us time to put together the initiatives and activities that will help our members grow professionally and personally. You have to believe me when I say yours was the first name on my list. I'm both honored and grateful that you are so gracefully agreed to join us here today. Thank you so much. Dipti, yourstory.com has published over 60,000 stories of entrepreneurs and change makers and helped more than 50,000 entrepreneurs access networking and funding opportunities in the last 12 years. As editor at large, your contribution is invaluable to the economic ecosystem of the country. Kudos and thank you for agreeing to steer this conversation. With that, over to Priya to take the afternoon forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Usha. So we'll take just a few more moments to introduce the illustrious career paths of our speakers today. Vinita Bali is a global business leader with extensive experience in leading large companies, both in India and overseas. She has worked with eminent multinationals like the Coca-Cola Company and Cadbury Schweppes PLC, in addition to Britannia Industries Limited. She also served on the global boards of Syngenta International AG and Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, a Geneva-based foundation. Currently, she serves as a non-executive director on the global boards of Smith and Nephew PLC, Cognizant Technology Solutions, and Vange Limited. She was also on the board of Titan Company Limited for 12 years from 2006. Vinita was among 27 global leaders appointed by the UN in 2012 to help improve maternal and child health as part of its SUN Scaling Up Nutrition initiative, and completed her term in 2016. She has been recognized in forums nationally and internationally and won several awards for her contribution to business and society. Dipti Nair, an award-winning journalist and media person, is presently editor-at-large at Your Story Media, India's biggest platform for startups and entrepreneurs. She started her career with the Free Press Journal in Indore and later moved to the Telegraph. She served as editor of Deccan Herald's Sunday magazine, Sunday Herald. She has also written for the National Geographic Traveler India, India Today Travel Plus, and Little India, a US-based NRI magazine. She then took a leap of faith to join Ink Talks, where she was the editorial director. Her stint with startups continued when she worked as a radio journalist for radiowala.in. When not writing, editing, interviewing, or traveling, she likes to spend time behind the potter's wheel. Welcome, both of you. Audience, please leave your questions for our speakers in the chat box. We will take them up at the end of the session. A gentle reminder to keep your video off and audio on mute for an undisturbed viewer experience. And now it's over to you, Dipti. to unravel Vinita's thoughts on why EQ matters in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be a part of this August gathering. And thank you so much, Usha, also for this welcome and for giving me this opportunity to be here and to talk to all of you. And it is an honor to be talking to Ms. Vinita Bali today. I have always admired her from afar and have been inspired her by her many media interviews. And I'm glad that I get to have this conversation with her today. Hello, Vinita. You recently, talked about empathy being an important element of leadership in an interview with Your Story founder and CEO Shraddha Sharma. What is that important aspect that gets missed out when leadership lacks empathy?
Thank you, Dipti. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Before I come to the answer, I just want to say thanks to Usha as well as Priya for your very warm and welcoming words. And, Fiki Flow is something that I have been associated with over the years, various chapters. In fact, I think I was in Hyderabad not that many years ago in person, actually, then did something more recently in Bombay. So it's great. And I just want to say how much I admire what all the participants of Fiki Flow actually do. And, the number of new things you come up with and the innovation and creativity in all of that. So thanks for this opportunity. Dipti, coming to your question on empathy, what happens when there's no empathy? I think if we start off with what is the purpose of leadership, and then work backwards to what is the role of empathy in leadership, it might be an interesting way of looking at it. And I use the word leadership and not leader in a very deliberate manner. And if any of you have heard me talking, you'll probably be bored of my saying this over and over again, that, there's nothing called a leader. Leadership is all that matters, because actually leadership is a verb. Leadership is behavior. Leader could be a position, it could be a title, but just because I have the title of president or CEO or whatever title you want to choose, doesn't necessarily make me a leader. So leadership is really about taking ownership to make something better than it is or it was before. Leadership is about taking accountability for making a difference in a positive way. Leadership is about impacting large-scale transformation and change, whether that is in an institution, an organization, a school, an NGO, it doesn't really matter. So leadership is about what I do, not what I say, or what my business card says, or what my position is. And therefore, for leadership to be effective, you have to understand context. Unless we understand context, any action we take will not make sense to the people who are in that environment. And what do I mean by that? If my context is, let's say, a primary school, I have to understand not just what the kids have on their mind, but more importantly, why the parents have sent those children to that school in the first place. What are the parents' expectations from school? What are the parents' expectations from teachers? If on the other hand, I am working for an NGO, understanding that context, let's say that NGO is in the nutrition space, I have to have a good understanding of that context in nutrition, what happens in the Anganwadi centers and the primary healthcare centers, etc., for me to be effective in my leadership position. So empathy starts with the ability to understand context. And the ability to understand context really is a matter of, first of all, your ability to listen. If I come into this conversation saying, I don't care what question Dipti asks me, I'm just going to answer whatever I feel like answering, it'll be a very strange conversation. So my context right now is to listen to what you're asking me very carefully and do my best to answer that. Similarly, in the absence of an understanding of context, it's very hard to be effective. And empathy, therefore, is the ability to put yourself in a different situation. It is the ability to see something not from your mental model or your point of view, but from somebody else's mental model or somebody else's point of view. You know, let's say today in the middle of COVID, people were to say all schools are going to open and it is compulsory for children to come to school. It's ridiculous because we haven't then understood the anxiety, the fear that parents will have to live with if that was done. So it's a very basic thing, but you know, and therefore without empathy, you can't really relate to anything else. And empathy, if I may add, I'm giving a very long answer to your very short question. Empathy is not just with another individual. The question we have to ask ourselves is, am I empathetic to the environment? Am I empathetic to the fact that I should not allow trees to be cut? Am I empathetic to the fact that my garbage should not be on the streets of my city or my town or whatever it is? Am I empathetic to the fact that, birds and bees and flowers need to grow in a particular way? So I think empathy is the way we live our life. You are on mute, Dipti.
It's the base of anything, I get from what you are saying. It's the basis of any sort of relationship, whether it is professional or personal, and by its association to a larger context, right? Yes, definitely. So I just shift a little bit here, Vinita, and you've been described by the media, and I love that. I would like to know how you look at it, but I think they've been fondly described as Britannia's tough cookie. And under your direction, Britannia's revenue tripled. We all, it's been documented. And in 2011, you were named in Forbes list of Asia's 50 most powerful businesswomen. I can hazard a guess that empathy was a core ingredient in the recipe of your success. It will be inspiring to actually hear about this, about a little bit about your journey and how it is played. Of course, I've heard you now also what you just now said. It's so obvious that you hold that as a core of your being. So just tell us a little bit about this.
So Dipti, happy to share the Britannia story, but if you ask me, I think what has really worked for me, and Britannia was closer to home, it is what happened in India. But actually, the bigger challenges that I faced were when I went and worked overseas in different environments in different countries. And that is where your test of empathy is, or your emotional intelligence really plays out. Because, whatever it is, you grew up in India, I was born in India, you went to school and college in India. We somehow, whether we overtly recognize it or not, but there's a very good organic understanding of India, the market, the consumers, the people of India, the diversity, and so on. But I, with Cadbury's, was lucky enough to work in the United Kingdom. I was there for 2 years. I was in Nigeria for a year at a very difficult time from a macroeconomic perspective in the middle of the biggest ever devaluation they had, etc. Then I was fortunate to go and work in South Africa with Cadbury's in 93, 94, and I was there when the first election happened in South Africa and Mr. Mandela was elected president. Then I joined the Coca-Cola company and moved to Atlanta with Coke. I then went to Latin America. I lived in Santiago in Chile for 3 years and then came back to Atlanta. So where your empathy, your listening skills, your emotional intelligence is really tested is when you're in unfamiliar territory. And then what you have to do, first of all, you have to remember that you are the odd person out. Most people in Nigeria are Nigerians, and then, You go as the single woman from India and everybody's looking at you and saying, okay, what are you doing here? So I think that is where spending time and thinking about context, that is where listening to people, that is where, um, as Americans say, first seek to understand and then be understood. And I think it's a very good lesson to remember. And again, it goes back, Deepti, to what I talked about context. If there is an understanding of context, then most people are smart enough, intuitive enough, intelligent enough to know what to do. We often make mistakes because either we are in a hurry to go and do something, or we are impatient, or we are not diligent enough. We're not investing that time to understand what the context is. So the same thing happens in business. um, think about, you have to have empathy when you are in a family. And by family, I don't just mean your immediate family and spouse and kids or parents or siblings, but think about, in India, we live in so many joint families. I think an understanding of what happens in families, there are very happy moments in families, and then you hear about families that are fighting and squabbling with each other because there is a property dispute or whatever. A lot of it really comes from not investing enough in that understanding. And think about it, it's very simple. I cannot have a relationship with you if you and I don't understand each other. Without understanding, there's no respect, and without respect, you don't end up taking the right action. So, similarly in business, whether it was the Britannia turnaround or the Coca-Cola turnaround or the Cadbury turnaround in several of these countries, it's exactly the same thing. Business lives and dies on the basis of how well business managers, owners, whoever is running the business understands the consumer, understands the needs of the consumer, understands how you reach the consumer, either through customers, how do you go to market, understands the larger ecosystem of other vendors and other players involved, understands the ecosystem of regulatory and government affairs. And it is with this understanding, and each one of us brings to the work that we do a certain passion, a certain aspiration, a certain ambition, a certain commitment. And then when it is really clear that, these are my consumers, this is my business, then the rest of it becomes very easy, because, then if you've got an energized team which understands each other, which most of them all understands the purpose of what it is that you're trying to do. Am I only selling a biscuit or a chocolate, or am I selling a moment of affordable joy in somebody's life? Or am I selling something which tastes good but also gives you some micronutrients like vitamins and minerals? So all of these things really come together. And in a nutshell, I think business, or I come from marketing, so I like to think that all of business is marketing, but it is the ability to identify an opportunity. Second, to identify, to create a business model that can commercialize that opportunity and do so at a profit. If these three things fall in line, then the business is a recurring success. Whether I'm selling saris, or I'm selling flowers, or I'm selling motor cars or aeroplanes or whatever. If these three things are not in alignment, then it'll be hard for that business to be a success. So we did exactly the same thing. We went back to the consumer. We looked at consumer needs. We looked at opportunities. We segmented the opportunities, not segmented the market. And that's how you create enduring business success. And without people, nothing is possible.
Yeah. And also what you're saying is the perspective, that if you need to have the other's perspective as well. I mean, that's the core of, I guess, empathy. That's when you understand your customer, you understand your employees better. For the next two questions, I would like to invite Usha to be the moderator on the hot seat. Please, Usha, your questions to Vinita.
Thank you, Dipti, and I'm really totally immersed in this interesting conversation. And Vinita, I have come across this sentence. I like to go in and take things apart. There's nothing exciting about doing the doable. This is in one line says a lot about your style of leadership. Tell us a bit about how you honed your leadership style.
It's an interesting question. I never thought about my leadership style. I guess I just did what I felt was the right thing to do, and the style emerged. And I think the style also emerged because of the opportunities that I was given. And I'm extremely, grateful to the people I worked with, all professionals, all of whom, gave me the most wonderful opportunities, frankly, well beyond my own dream at that time. But I'm also temperamentally the kind of person who says, okay, if you've given me an opportunity, I'm ready to jump into it and I'll do my best and then let's see what happens. And I think when you go into an opportunity saying that, it's very hard to define what success looks like when you're beginning, but it's easier to define what are the right actions to take. And I think if you take the right actions, then it's not as though everything will end up being a success. It's not as though I've not had any failure on my hands. I have. I've launched new products that haven't, done well. We've entered certain geographies where it was, too early or too late to enter the geography. So we had to step back. And so I don't consider any of that to be a failure. I say that if you are not experimenting, if you're not exploring, how would you know what is a success or a failure? And to explain that, let me use a sporting analogy. It doesn't matter whether your name is Federer or Djokovic or Nadal or, whichever sport you want to choose. Each of these great players, even when they were number one in their sport, they have won matches and they have lost matches. Just because Nadal loses to a Federer doesn't make Nadal a less of a player. It simply means that in that game, on that day, his opponent happened to be better than him. But it's just one Grand Slam in the very rich history of these sports people. Similarly, with all of us in life, whether it is in business or whether it is personal decisions you make, some of them turn out to be right, some of them don't turn out to be so right. But I think the important thing is to step back and say, what do I need to do differently? So that, what you said, I like to take things apart and put them together again, really is, I am not a status quo person. Every time I've really been in 3 companies with 3 very long stints, actually 4 companies. Paultaz was my starting company. And I did consulting for a while. But, in each of those, my whole thing was, if you're looking for somebody to come and, do what is being done in the past, then I should not be the one you're speaking with. If you're interested in, discontinuous growth, if you're interested in, a lot of challenges and exploration and so on, that's what excites me. And if that excites you, then we have a deal. And if it doesn't, then you need to go and find someone who will, grow at a very good, steady 7-8%, not rock the boat, and everything is fine. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying they are different. And one of the things we were talking about empathy, and empathy and emotional intelligence are not very far apart. I think one of the essentials of emotional intelligence is to be aware of yourself and what you like to do and what your temperament is. You know, what I do may or may not be the right thing for you to do, and what you're doing exceedingly well, I could never do. So that is why I think I keep saying, give me something that I can take, like Humpty Dumpty, take it apart and put it back together again.
That's quite interesting. Actually, in this forum, there are many um, first generation entrepreneurs like me, and definitely it gives a lot of insight.
Mhm.
Yeah, and yeah, I would like to ask you my second question. Please throw some light on how does EQ trump over IQ at the workplace? Or do you think both are needed, like the yin and yang and the yang?
Definitely, it's not one or the other. And it's not possible to have, actually, it is. It is possible to have very high IQ and very low EQ. Both are needed because they are both complementary. When you're dealing with people, you're not dealing with intellect alone. You're dealing with emotion. You're dealing with anxiety. You're dealing with fear. You're dealing with aspiration. You're dealing with inspiration. So, unless you can connect with an individual on these factors, the other individual can't really connect with you. So, IQ is also important because IQ is what enables us to solve problems. IQ is what enables us to be objective. IQ, in a sense, if you think about it differently, I would call IQ is more like cognitive intelligence, and EQ is empathetic intelligence. And both are required because to be successful in business, which all of you are here, you're entrepreneurs, first generation, second generation, doesn't really matter. So there has to be a certain cognition, there has to be a certain recognition, there has to be good quantitative reasoning, there has to be a problem solving ability. All of that is IQ. But then there has to be that connect. It has to be that connect with your employees, that connect with your vendors, that connect with your consumers, that connect with your customers. And that is the connect which is absolutely critically needed. Here I think the best way I can talk about EQ and IQ is what Maya Angelou said. She said that over the years I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will even forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that is EQ.
Yeah, I completely agree, Vinita. There is an interconnection and strong link between each and every person in the organization. And a leader can define exactly a company's mindsets and cultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's why his or her word, thought, or action carries a lot of weightage. So, a leader with both IQ and EQ is better equipped to propel a company to new heights. Thank you for this clarity. Yeah, please.
No, I was just going to say, I'll go back to where we started with Dipti. Um, it's more about leadership. You can't have leadership without a good balance. You can't have effective leadership. Let's put it that way. You can't have effective leadership without a good balance of IQ and EQ. Because good leadership is about making the connection, and it is not necessarily coming from the person at the top. It is not necessary. Leadership should be evident everywhere in the organization, whether there are 5 people in the company or 5,000 or 500,000 people in the company, because leadership is a behavior, and you want the culture of your organization to be such that people are resonating with that kind of behavior.
Thank you so much, Usha, for those questions. And Vinita, coming back to empathy and coming back to emotions, because all these words you were talking about their emotions, etc. In the workplace for us women, it becomes very tricky because emotions are always sort of associated with the women employees. And, recently Nike did a very interesting ad, which everybody's been sharing. It was a nice, good, beautiful representation of sports women and their resilience, right? Despite being called crazy and like, oh, they're too emotional, mad woman, and etc. kind of stuff that women are told when they are in a high position or even otherwise, I guess. So, do you think this association with EQ or emotional intelligence, or be it empathy, is very much goes against women, or how does it play out in gender in the workplace?
I think not at all. I don't think, we have to be apologetic. It is not as though men are not emotional.
Yeah.
Look at, and their emotion is a different emotion. They get angry, they shout, they use foul language. And, there are so many of them around in the workplace. Look at the way men behave at home. So, it's not that men are not emotional and women are emotional. I think we may express our emotions differently, but that is okay. And I think this is also something, it is something which is perpetuated by men, and somehow women fall for it, and we shouldn't. What is absolutely important is we have to walk in to our places of work with confidence in our ability, with a certain degree of self assuredness, self esteem. If I don't respect myself, how can I expect anybody else to respect me? I think that is where it starts. And because it starts there, you make it very clear that you're not taking any nonsense from anybody, be that man, woman, child, neighbor, nobody. I mean, if you have respect for yourself and you have dignity for yourself, then you're not going to take nonsense from anybody, no matter whether that person is family or associate at work or a stranger. And I think when you make those lines very clear, then people understand. People only take chances, or people, as the Americans would say, mess with people because they think they can get away with it. And I think what is absolutely important is, it is, as Eleanor Roosevelt said, nobody can make you feel small without your permission. So I think those are the things to remember. I can give you examples of the greatest of great athletes. Think of all the athletes during the Olympic Games who are standing on that podium and who've got a medal, whether it is a gold, silver, or bronze medal, and their national anthem is playing. Tell me how many of them don't cry. The big ones like a Michael Jordan, and people, being emotional is a very, actually, it's not even a human response. Look at animals. Look at the way animals relate to each other, or animals relate to human beings. Anybody who's got a dog or a cat or whatever will be able to say that. So I think emotion is something which is a natural. I think it is unnatural to suppress your emotions. We've had wonderful presidents and prime ministers, who have shed a tear because they've watched a performance or they've heard something which has so moved them. And these happen to be men, these are not women. So I don't think we need to make any apologies. However, what is absolutely important is this whole thing when we talk about EQ. The components of EQ is, first of all, I've got to be aware of myself and, how other people react to me. I also have to then learn to manage myself. I need to be able to, look around the room, read body language, etc. The next thing in EQ is that I've got to be socially aware. You know, how are other people responding to me? And only then can you get to this whole thing of socially being able to relate to somebody. Because if the first three are not there, your social interaction is also very awkward. You know, why are we so comfortable relating to our school friends? Because, you know, when we went through school, nobody was hiding anything. You know, we laughed, we cried, we joked, you know, all of that. And I think that is that degree of comfort that self-assured people have, which is, I am going to be myself. And you will see me for who I am in any situation. But that doesn't mean that I rave and rant and I throw a tantrum and so on. That is what emotional intelligence is all about.
I mean, I would love to hear your experiences in the boardroom, and because of probably the only woman on the table, like if you would like to share something. I mean, it would be interesting because you've traveled so many places and been sitting in the boardroom. Has that ever have you ever felt that because of my gender or I was discriminated?
No, you know, first of all, not just in boardrooms. You know, when I joined Cadbury's in India, I was the first woman to join Cadbury's as a manager. And this is 1980, so we're not talking about the 18th century. You know, in 1980, I was the first woman to join Cadbury. You know, I was the first woman ever to be on the board of Cadbury Nigeria, Cadbury South Africa, and so on. You know, I was the third ever division president in the 100-year history of the Coca-Cola company when I went to Santiago in Chile. So I'm very used to being the only woman in a room full of, you know, 40, 50 men. But interestingly, I never think of myself in gender terms, and I don't think of anybody else in gender terms. At work, we are colleagues. And frankly, your gender doesn't matter to me, because at work, what is really important is your, you know, as I've said, when we come into work, we come in with what? We come in with our academic qualification, we come in with our experience, we come in with our temperament, we come in with our attitude, we come in with our EQ, with our IQ. There's nothing to do with gender there. It's completely gender agnostic. And yet there is so much of obsession with gender because firstly, the men, it suits the men to have those conversations and women just fall for it. And I think we should just stop about talking about gender. It's like, you know, we are colleagues, and your gender or any other orientation, what religion you are, what your sexual orientation is, what is your ethnicity, which school you came from, where you went, how does that matter? Because we are here to do a job, to take responsibility, and do it really well with the highest of integrity and commitment and passion. And, you know, gender has no role to play. So I have pretty much ignored it all my life. And if people want to say something, it's their problem, not mine.
That's a good attitude, definitely. You also talked about being in South Africa at the time of Nelson Mandela's, you know, when he became the country's first Black president. Any memories of that? Would you like to share? What did it feel like? Because of obviously, watching Nelson Mandela and the stories that we had heard. Any memories that you would like to share about him?
Actually, wonderful memories. I was very, very, very fortunate to meet him face to face.
Oh, nice.
Before the elections. And actually, from a historical point of view, it couldn't have been a better time to be in South Africa. You know, we have read so much about South Africa, what apartheid was, what it meant, the separation. So I went there in 1993. Mr. Mandela was released from prison in 1990. So this was the time when the ANC and the National Party were having its dialogue on the transition of, not the transition of power, but the transition to a new South Africa, which was sort of the rainbow nation because it had whites, blacks, colors, you know, so many big canvas of diversity, if you like. And this was at an event, and it was at an event, sponsored by not sponsored, hosted by the Indian consulate. And Mr. Mandela was there, and it's one of those things where you always wish for this moment to meet somebody like him, and then when it happens, you are completely tongue-tied. So we were standing in a group, and then people started walking when the formal function was to begin, and for some reason he and I were just the last ones to go, and there was this beautiful tree. And Mr. Mandela was a wonderful personality, very charismatic, and he loved to be surrounded by women and all that in a very gentlemanly fashion. So I said, Mr. Mandela, this has always been, at the back of my head. And I've seen Robben Island, where you were for 27 years. What was your biggest fear when you were there for all these years? And his answer just floored me. And that is why people like him do what they do. They are who they are, him, Gandhiji, so many of these people who live by their conviction. And his response to me was that, my biggest fear was that when I was free, I would not let anger come in the way of what I needed to do. I mean, here's someone and 27 years of the best years of his life. And he's saying his fear was that anger should not come in the way. Now, if this is not, the Mount Everest of emotional intelligence, I don't know what is.
True. Yeah. I wish we had, you could have taken selfie at that time.
I know. We didn't even have cell phones. This was 1994.
Yeah. Vinita, one more thing that is very close to your heart also, which I've been reading, is about nutrition, right? Nutrition is something that when you were in Britannia, you fortified those biscuits. And then, of course, a lot of work happened around that and feeding a lot of children. Tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing right now in terms of nutrition and why is it so dear to you? I think have we lost her?
It looks like we've lost connection.
Yeah. Oh, she's back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, because everybody froze on my
Yeah.
on my screen. So I think nutrition is. I continue to work in the domain because I think it is absolutely critical for India to get its act on nutrition absolutely right, and we are not there at all. We are amongst the lowest in rankings on nutritional parameters, not just when we compare ourselves with the developed world, but also in comparison with all our neighbors, whether it is a Nepal or a Bangladesh or a Sri Lanka or anybody. We are 102 out of 117 countries on nutrition. And it's very important for all of us to understand that for a very simple reason, that nutrition impacts both our physical growth as well as cognitive development. In other words, our health and nutrition parameters are determined by nutrition in the first 1,000 days, which means from conception to your second birthday. And there have been innumerable studies published in very well respected and regarded journals like the Lancet, which have shown an irreversible linkage between poor nutrition and poor cognitive outcomes. Very often in India, we say year after year, tests are then done in schools, and the findings are that the math ability of children in class 7 is equivalent to the math ability of children in class 2. Now, it's not that those people are dumb. It's that they've been deprived of the right kind of nutrition, both macronutrients as well as micronutrients, at a time when they needed that nutrition. Look at the condition of adolescent girls in India. You know, there are cultural factors, there are other factors. So basically, if, you know, 1 out of every 4 children that is born in this country is born underweight. And if you're a girl, then everything turns upside down for you immediately. You know, if you largely, I'm talking obviously in generalities, it may not be in, you know, homes of people who are on this call and so on, but I'm talking about the general population of India. So, you know, in the last 10 years or so, the number of undernourished people in our population has declined from 26% to 17%. But 17% of 1.3 billion people is still 200 million people. And that is why, you know, we have to care. So the work that I did in Britannia, the work that other companies are doing, whether it is Mother Dairy or, you know, a lot of other branded food companies, you know, Danone, Nestle, etc., is only one of the things, which is that if to the food that we sell, we can add micronutrients, called micronutrients because you need very little dosage of those, which are vitamins and minerals, then we end up making that edible oil, which is fortified with vitamin A and D, more nutritious. So whether you are cooking in that oil or you're frying in that oil, you know, that the goodness of those vitamins A and D, whether it is in oil or in milk, get to you, iron in things like, you know, fortified flour, etc. So for the sake of our country, for the sake of the health of this country, it's very important. Right now, it has become even more important than anything else. You know, with COVID-19, everybody's talking about immunity. And where do you get immunity from? Immunity is the direct result of good nutrition. So if you don't have good nutrition, you don't have good immunity. If you don't have good immunity, you are susceptible to all kinds of infections. And if you're susceptible to all kinds of infections, you know, I mean, you're wasting a lot of your money and time and effort running into hospitals when you didn't need to. So therefore, attention to food and nutrition should be priority number 1 for everybody. You're on mute, Dipti.
Yeah, there's a lot of traffic noise outside, so I had to do that.
Sure.
I can just go on and on, like, you know, I have so many other questions, and but I think in the interest of time, we will pause here because a lot of audience questions perhaps going to be there. So I think Priya, if you're around, if you could share some of the audience questions, please.
Yeah, I have them mostly in my personal window. So I'll just quickly read out a couple of them. I think one or two I can see here. Charul is asking, in a small to mid-sized company, when we hire managerial employees, what do you feel should be given more weightage, EQ or IQ? The other thing is, how do we gauge their EQ and IQ while hiring them?
So I don't think the size of the company matters. Actually, I would say in a smaller company, because you have fewer people, you want to make even more sure that you've got absolutely the right kind of people. So IQ and EQ, as we said earlier, both are critical and important because they enable you to address different tasks. You know, EQ enables all your relationship issues, all your relationship advantages come from a high EQ. Your ability to problem solve, etc., comes from a good IQ. So it shouldn't matter whether you're a small or a big company. How do you determine IQ and EQ? Several ways of doing that. If you're hiring somebody from another company, then reference checks are always, you know, there's nothing more compelling than actual experience of an individual. So, you know, certainly in all the companies that I've worked in, reference checks used to be very important and critical. On things like EQ, there are actually very good psychometric tests that are available where, you call in a person, you've looked at their past track record, what have they done. If I am hiring, or if you are hiring me, you have to also feel comfortable with me as a person. People say there has to be good chemistry. That good chemistry is, some people can make that out immediately, some people can't. So it's always good for more than one person to interview somebody who you're hiring. So if you've got two or three other people, including whoever this person is going to work with or work for or work under, some of those are good practices. And then you can actually get very good psychometric tests done, which actually tells you what is the orientation of the person, how the person thinks. Given a choice between being task oriented and people oriented, how will this person behave under those set of circumstances? So, all those tools are available today for employers to actually use.
Thank you so much, Vinita. Brinda Jatia is asking, in a company where two generations are working, how do you manage IQ or EQ?
In the same way as you would manage in a company where four generations are working. It doesn't matter. I don't think generation is the issue. I think what we are really saying is, irrespective of my age, there are some 70-year-olds who behave, more like what you would expect, the enthusiasm of a 25 or a 30-year-old, and then you've got some 25-year-olds who are already so cynical. So I don't think physical age is what we are looking at. Of course, physical age determines your experience and so on. But I think all the more reason that EQ is required in all the generations to actually understand context, to understand each other. In the absence of that EQ, you will either lead from fear. So, the head, the hierarchical head of the family has said this, and that's the way, it's going to happen. So nobody opens their mouth. That's not an ideal culture, but there are many family businesses where that is the culture. And that is because nobody wants to tackle the difficult issues. So for the older generation to understand the younger generation has to be extremely patient. There is no sense of entitlement. You have to be patient. You have to talk to the older generation to get them to see how the world is changing. So it is incumbent on every generation to come forward with that level of understanding and say, what is that meeting ground? If the meeting ground is values, then we say, okay, on the values, there is no compromise. Let's now talk about the behaviors which will embody those values.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Given today's boom in startup culture and expectations of fast-paced growth, is EQ practically possible?
I don't know why we are even questioning EQ. I mean, without EQ, what will you do? How will you relate to anything? Nobody will be able to relate to you, and you will not be able to relate to anything. So, nothing is fast-paced. We thought we were in a very fast-paced world, and what has COVID said to us? But even your fast pace, on Monday we had the economic results of India's growth, and we are minus 25%. People are saying that it's probably more than that. So we can't take anything for granted. Even before COVID, let me keep COVID aside. Even before COVID, our March quarter growth was 3%. Compared to the previous March quarter growth of 5%, compared to the previous March quarter growth of 8%. So there is no fast-paced growth. And I think we all have to understand, just because we have 1.3 billion people in this country, doesn't mean that they are standing in line to buy our products. Many of them cannot even afford the essentials. So We cannot take anything, and especially fast-paced growth, as a given. The world that we're living in today has challenged every paradigm. We can't travel, we can't get on a plane, we can't meet each other. Even if we meet each other, we have to be socially distanced. This meeting would have been happening, I would have been in Hyderabad, we would have all been in some five-star hotel, and so on and so forth. But look at the way things have changed, and we've all accepted it. That is also part of EQ, to accept things for what they are, and within that, to make the best of what we have. So I would say in no business can you take anything for granted.
Our past chair, Monica Agarwal, wants to know, is it better to let go of a person if the value systems are different, or should we work on this?
If values are different, you can't change values. In my opinion, at least, and you know, what do I mean by values? If I feel that, you know, it's okay to give money to somebody to get something done, because after all, we have to get something done. You know, that's a value system. That is not going to change if that's the way I am. You know, unless you're the organization which says, it's fine, you know, our entire organization will work like this. But if my values say, under no circumstance do we take any favors by making a payment that is not kosher, then if values diverge, you can't change values.
Wow, that's quite difficult to emulate, I would say, in India setting especially. Not many
No,
do that.
that's not true. That's absolutely not true. I think people follow examples. People, you know, don't forget that your employees are actually very smart. They are looking at your behavior all the time. They are saying, okay, in this stressful situation, you know, what is Dipti doing, or Usha doing, or, you know, Vinita doing? And if they see us behaving in inconsistent ways, etc., they'll say, okay, they say one thing, they do quite another thing. So I will also do that. So, therefore, as somebody said, your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear your words. You have to remember that it is your actions that will communicate everything to your employees, not just your words. And if you say, no, we are a very honest company and we will do things the right way, we will not cut corners, we will not do this, we will not do that, and then you go and cut corners and whatever, then you end up confusing people, and then you can't blame people for behaving inconsistently. But it's not that hard. You know, I have operated in India at a very, very senior level, and I can tell you for 9.5 years, there was nothing that we did which was either taking a favor. We delayed our decisions. We undertook higher cost. I went to the board and I said that, look, because of this reason, we can't do this and that. But you have to take a stand. You have to operate with certain principles and values, because if you don't, then you lose control over what everybody else in your organization is going to do. And you've got to do it because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. I do know a couple of companies and leaders like that, and I hold them in high esteem. So I know exactly what you're saying. Thank you. So this is a kind of a personal question here. You grew up in a household with 3 siblings. So how did your early years shape your values that you're carrying even to today?
So we were 3 of us. I have 2 brothers. No, I mean, you know, my dad used to work for the government, and what was always emphasized at home was the value of education. So our parents did everything to put us through, you know, the best schools in Delhi at that time. And, you know, it was a very open household. We had lots of discussions around meal times. You know, my mother was a great storyteller, so every Saturday and Sunday was story time. So she would tell us stories from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and the, the other old texts and so on. And we were encouraged to do whatever we wanted to do. So I ended up doing everything that I wanted to do.
That's great. And with that, I think we will wind up our conversation. And I must say, what we understood, what came out very clearly today was the importance of self-assurance or self-awareness, social awareness, and self-management. That EQ works inside out, and that it's a determinant factor in any organization's sustainability and success story. I will hand you over now to our Senior Vice Chairperson, Uma Chigurupati, to deliver her vote of thanks.
Thank you. I would say there's just one other thing, self-respect before anything else. We've all got to respect ourselves, and then everybody will respect us. I think that's absolutely important and critical.
Totally agree.
Priya, I'll just take a second, and I would like to thank Vinita also. Thank you so much. It was a very interesting conversation, and I would like to continue that some other time.
Sure.
And
thank you.
So
very
much.
Nice. Enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah.
All the best to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinita.
Over to you, Uma.
A very good evening. Empathy is the ability to understand context. That is the way we live our lives. Very well said. We have witnessed a very interesting and enlightening session today from two distinguished personalities. One is a business leader who is one of the Asia's 50 powerful businesswomen, and the other one is an award-winning journalist. A leader's actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more. They always practice the 3 R's: respect for self, respect for others, and responsibility for all their actions. Emotional quotient is a very valuable skill that helps to improve communication, management, problem solving, and relationships within the workplace, of course, personally too. It can be improved by training and practice. My heartfelt thanks to Vinita Bali, who is with us today, and for giving such an insightful information about leadership skills. Thank you so much. I thank Ms. Dipti Nair for taking forward the conversation in a very interesting and informative way. I thank our gold sponsors, Polman Group, and branding partners, RBC Worldwide, for their support. Congratulations to the committee members who are all involved in bringing out this program, and IT team for all the technical support. Thank you so much. Thank you, past chairs and fellow members of the FLO chapters and the viewers of today's program. I think the carry home today will be the essence of a great leader is influence, not authority. So stay safe and take care of yourself. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you for the opportunity, and my very best to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vinita ji.
IT team, can we have the closing slides, please? On behalf of Chairperson Usharani Manne and her committee, I thank you all for joining us here today. We begin next week with a talk by Luke Coutinho on nutrition for positive mental health, especially in these times. Friday, we'll see angel investor Sanjay Jasrani speaking about funding for startups, which most of us need to listen to. So please be there for these curated events. Until then, stay safe, stay positive. Namaste.